It's 1963 Dearborn, Michigan. Inside a quiet Ford engineering room, a small V8 sat on a steel stand. Nothing about it looked revolutionary. No massive displacement, no exotic materials, no polished chrome or racing decals, just a compact, cast-iron small block. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Engineers walked past without a second glance. But what almost nobody knows is, this engine would go on to power one of the most important performance revolutions in American history. And it nearly didn't survive at all. Most people think they know the story of Ford's 289. The Mustang engine, the Cobra engine, the one that helped Ford take on Europe and win. But the truth? The real story is messier, riskier, and far more technical than anyone expected. Because this wasn't just an engine. It was a gamble, a desperate attempt to prove something. And it almost failed before it ever had a chance to win. At the start of the 1960s, Ford was in a strange place. They were building millions of cars, dominating sales charts, filling driveways across America with Galaxies and Fairlanes and Falcons. But something was missing: excitement, identity, performance. Chevrolet had its legendary small block V8, the engine that powered Corvettes and won races and made young men dream about open roads. Chrysler had its high-compression monsters, Hemis and Wedge engines that made newspaper headlines and broke speed records. Ford? Reliable, yes. Practical, sure. But not feared, not respected. Not the kind of brand that made a young guy's heart race when he saw one pull up at a stoplight. That's when a quiet shift began inside Ford's engineering teams. A small group of engineers started asking a different question. What if they didn't need a bigger engine? What if they needed a smarter one? Smaller? Lighter? Stronger? Something that could rev higher and respond faster than anything else on the road. So they started with the Windsor small block architecture, a compact V8 design with a 4.0-inch bore spacing and a thin wall casting technique that kept weight down to around 460 pounds. That might sound heavy by today's standards, but compared to the 600-plus pound big blocks of the era, it was practically lightweight. The early versions were modest, 221 cubic inches, then 260. Decent engines for everyday driving, but nothing that would make a racing team sit up and pay attention. Nothing special. Then came the 289. With a 4.0-inch bore and a 2.87-inch stroke, it displaced exactly 289 cubic inches, about 4.7 liters in modern terms. On paper, it looked ordinary, just another incremental improvement. But Ford had bigger plans, because across the Atlantic, something was happening. European sports cars, light, agile, and brutally fast, were dominating international racing circuits. Ferrari with its blood-red machines and screaming V12s, Jaguar with its elegant curves and racing pedigree, Aston Martin with its understated power. These weren't just cars, they were symbols of European engineering superiority. And American manufacturers, they were seen as crude, powerful maybe, but unsophisticated. Ford wanted to change that perception. They wanted in. They wanted to prove that American engineering could compete with the best in the world. That's when a man named Carroll Shelby entered the picture. Shelby wasn't your typical automotive executive. He was a Texas chicken farmer turned race car driver, a man who had won Le Mans in 1959 driving for Aston Martin, a man who understood racing from the inside. And he had one simple idea: take a lightweight British roadster, the AC Ace, a nimble little chassis with beautiful lines but a weak engine, and drop a powerful American V8 into it. Sounds simple, right? It wasn't. The British were skeptical. The Americans were hesitant. Nobody was sure if the combination would even work. But Shelby believed. At first, they used the 260. It fit, it ran, but it wasn't enough. Not for what Shelby had in mind. He wasn't building a weekend cruiser. He was building a Ferrari killer. So he asked Ford for more power, and Ford delivered something different. Not just a bigger engine, a better one. This is where the 289 Hypo was born, officially called the K-Code engine because of the letter K in its vehicle identification code. And it wasn't just a tuned version of the standard 289. It was rebuilt from the inside out. Every single component was examined, tested, and upgraded. The compression ratio jumped to 10.5.1, high for the time. Dangerously high, some said, especially on the pump gas that regular customers would be using. But higher compression meant more power, more efficiency, more response. The camshaft? Completely different. Solid lifters instead of hydraulic. That meant more precise valve timing, higher RPM capability, and a mechanical connection that wouldn't fade under stress. It also meant a signature ticking sound at idle, a sound that mechanics would later recognize instantly. A sound that told you this wasn't an ordinary engine. The connecting rods were beefed up significantly. Shot-peened for strength, a process that bombards the metal with tiny particles to increase fatigue resistance. Every rod was carefully balanced and inspected. The crankshaft was nodular iron, stronger and more durable than standard cast iron. It could handle the stress of sustained high RPM operation without cracking or deforming. Even the pistons were upgraded, forged instead of cast, designed to handle higher temperatures and greater cylinder pressures. The intake manifold was improved for better airflow. The exhaust headers were tuned for maximum scavenging. Every passage, every port, every surface was optimized. This wasn't a grocery getter engine anymore. This was a racing engine, disguised as a street motor. Officially, Ford rated it at 271 horsepower at 6,000 RPM, with 312 lb-ft of torque at 3,400 RPM. But those numbers were conservative. Ford was notorious for underrating its performance engines in this era. Insurance companies were already getting nervous about powerful cars. Regulators were watching closely, so the official numbers told only part of the story. In real-world conditions, especially with open exhaust, proper tuning, and high-quality fuel, many of these engines were pushing closer to 300 horsepower. Some race-prepared versions exceeded 350. And in a lightweight car, that changed everything. But there was a problem, a serious one. At high RPM, things started breaking. The first teams to push the 289 Hypo to its limits discovered something troubling. Oil pressure would drop unexpectedly. Bearings would overheat and fail. Mechanics reported seeing metal shavings in oil pans after track sessions. Tiny glittering particles that meant something inside was destroying itself. One crew member reportedly said, "We pulled the pan after a race and the bearings looked like charcoal briquettes, black and crumbling. The engine had maybe 2 more laps in it." At 6,000 RPM and above, exactly where the engine made its best power, the oiling system just couldn't keep up. The problem was the oil delivery priority. The system was feeding the top end first, valve train, camshaft, rocker arms, before the oil reached the crankshaft and main bearings. And that was backwards. Because the crankshaft is what takes the most punishment. It's spinning thousands of times per minute. It's absorbing the explosive force of every combustion event. It needs oil first. Without adequate lubrication, the bearing surfaces would run metal on metal. Friction would build, heat would spike, and then catastrophic failure. So Ford engineers went back to the drawing board. They reworked oil passages throughout the block. They improved bearing clearances to allow better oil flow. They modified the oil pump pickup and tested different oil viscosities. Some racing teams took matters into their own hands. Dry sump oiling systems, external oil coolers, AccuSump systems that stored pressurized oil for high G situations. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. And then they put it to the test. The Shelby Cobra, a tiny car, barely over 2,100 pounds with driver and fluids. The body was hand-formed aluminum over a tubular steel frame, light, strong, aerodynamic enough for the era. Now drop in a 289 Hypo making nearly 300 horsepower and you get a power-to-weight ratio that rivals exotic European machines costing 3 times as much. 0 to 60? Around 4.5 seconds. Some tested even faster. Quarter mile, low 12s with a good driver and proper traction. Top speed, over 150 mph on the right road. In the early 1960s, those numbers were insane. Supercars today barely beat them. And on the track, the real story began. At circuits across America and Europe, the Cobra started winning. Against bigger engines, against more expensive cars, against machines with decades of racing heritage. It wasn't just power, it was balance. The short 2.87-inch stroke allowed the engine to rev higher than most American V8s. The piston speed stayed manageable even at high RPM because the pistons weren't traveling as far. While big block American engines struggled past 5,500 RPM, their long strokes creating excessive piston speeds and valve float, the 289 Hypo could push beyond 6,500 without complaint. That meant more usable power, more flexibility on different tracks, the ability to downshift and accelerate out of corners without waiting for the engine to wind up. Drivers loved it. One driver reportedly said, "It just keeps pulling. You think it's done, you think you've hit the ceiling, and it isn't. There's more, always more." The Cobra's handling was another advantage. Lightweight and nimble, it could brake later and corner faster than heavier machines. The 289's compact dimensions kept the center of gravity low. But racing is never simple. During the 1964 season, Cobras were fast, but fragile. Engines overheated on hot days. Transmissions broke under the stress. Suspension components wore out faster than expected. And the competition was relentless. Ferrari, especially, was still dominant. They had decades of experience. They had unlimited budgets. They had the best drivers in the world. Enzo Ferrari himself reportedly dismissed the Cobras as agricultural machines. American tractors pretending to be sports cars, so Shelby pushed harder. Better cooling systems, revised airflow through the engine bay, oil coolers that could handle sustained high-speed running, better tuning, carburetor jetting optimized for each track, ignition timing adjusted for different altitudes and temperatures, better durability, reinforced components, improved quality control, endless testing. The team worked around the clock. Mechanics slept in the shop. Engineers argued over thousandths of an inch. And then came 1965, the FIA World Manufacturers' Championship. This wasn't just another race series. This was global, the most prestigious championship in sports car racing, the one that proved you were the best in the world. And Ford, with the Cobra and its 289 Hypo, was going up against Ferrari on the world stage. Race after race, the Cobras performed. At Daytona, at Sebring, at Le Mans and Monza and the Nürburgring, lightweight, agile, reliable enough, finally, to finish races that mattered. The team faced setbacks, blown engines, crashed cars, drivers pushing too hard and paying the price, but they kept coming back. And at the end of the season, Shelby American won the FIA World Manufacturers' Championship in the GT class. Ford had done it. They beat Ferrari, not with a massive engine, not with brute force, not with unlimited resources, but with a small block V8 that most people had underestimated. An engine that weighed less than 500 pounds and made over 300 horsepower. An engine that could rev to 7,000 RPM and still come back for more. An engine built in America, designed by American engineers, proving that American performance wasn't just about size. And yet, even as it reached its peak, the 289 Hypo's days were already numbered, because back in Detroit, the horsepower wars were escalating. Bigger engines were coming, the 427, the 428, the 429, massive big blocks with over 400 horsepower and enough torque to twist axles. Compared to those monsters, the 289 looked small, outdated even. Why buy 271 horsepower when you could buy 400? Production of the Hypo was always limited. Between 1963 and 1967, only about 13,000 K-code engines were built, a tiny number compared to the millions of regular 289s that rolled off the line. They were expensive too. In a Mustang, the Hypo package added several $100s to the sticker price, significant money when a whole car cost $3,000. Insurance companies noticed these cars. Young drivers were crashing them. Claims were piling up. So did regulators. By the late 1960s, emissions rules were tightening across the country. California led the way, but other states followed. High-compression engines like the 289 Hypo became harder to justify. They needed premium fuel, they ran hot, they produced more pollutants than lower compression alternatives. Ford began phasing it out. The last K-code engines were built in 1967. Replacing them came larger, lower compression engines that met new standards. The 302, the 3 and 51, engines that made decent power but couldn't rev like the Hypo. And just like that, the Hypo disappeared. But the story didn't end there, because something interesting happened over time. As the years passed, people started to remember. The 289 Hypo became legendary, not because it was the biggest, not because it made the most power, but because of how it made that power. High revving, responsive, durable when properly tuned, an engine that rewarded skill and precision. It became the heart of the early Mustang GTs, the cars that defined a generation. The soul of the Shelby Cobra, the car that proved America could build world-class sports cars, and a symbol of a different kind of American performance, one based on engineering rather than brute force. Today, original K-code Mustangs are highly collectible. Prices often exceed 6 figures for well-documented examples with matching numbers. Collectors search for years to find authentic cars. And original Shelby Cobras with 289 Hypo engines? They've sold for over $1 million at auction. Sometimes $2 million, sometimes more. Engine builders still study its design. That short stroke, that high compression, that balance between power and reliability. The lessons learned from the 289 Hypo influenced decades of small block development. The 302 that followed used many of the same principles. Even modern performance engines owe something to the ideas first tested in that little V8. So what made the 289 Hypo so special? It wasn't just the specs, it was the philosophy. Instead of going bigger, it went smarter. Instead of relying on displacement, it relied on efficiency, revs, and engineering precision. It proved that you didn't need the biggest engine to win. You just needed the right one. And that's what most people don't realize. The 289 Hypo didn't just power cars. It changed how engineers thought about performance. It helped Ford step onto the global racing stage. And it gave birth to machines that are still talked about today, 60 years later. All from a small, unassuming V8, sitting quietly on a stand in 1963. A gamble that paid off, a risk that redefined an era. And a reminder that sometimes the most revolutionary ideas don't look revolutionary at all. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments what you want to see next. Another engine, another rivalry, or another hidden piece of automotive history. And don't forget to subscribe.